Thank you very much, Pastor Fleming. It is a joy to be here, and not one snowflake, not one raindrop impeded my pathway. Pastor had sent a kind of a Mayday message saying, there appears to be a weather advisory. We're going to be buried in sleet and ice tomorrow. Well, God knew better, and I, for one, am thankful for that. It's a joy to be here. This is my second trip to Michigan ever, if you can imagine that. Probably because Chicago is in the middle. No, and probably because I am a Packer fan, yes. And of course, yes. And a Wisconsin fan, 7:49 tip-off time, Saturday. Dee. Oh, I'll be all right. Of all the things that I do, clinical work and teaching and working with doxology, one of the things I really enjoy doing a great deal is talking with parents. How many of you have children who are enrolled at our Savior's Lutheran School? Wonderful. How many of you are guests tonight? That's wonderful news. I add my welcome, and I'm so pleased you're here. One of the things that I discovered in clinical practice is that of all the challenging things that exist in the world, one of the most challenging are the little creatures in shoes around our dinner tables. And they keep growing and growing and growing. I would say that at least 50% of my clinical practice was devoted to working with parents and their children. And sometimes we talk to the parents, and sometimes we would talk to the children, and sometimes we'd all get together in one room and see what makes some sense. So my conversation with you this evening is about parents and their children. It's going to be a hands-on, how to do it, kind of equipping parents to try out some new and exciting things at home. All right? Not that it's any kind of a sinister strategy, but you will leave this evening with strategies that you can try out at home, and generally a giggle or two along the way, which is probably reasonable. My guess is that there are bazillions of books about parenting. If you went on Amazon right now, you would be completely inundated with countless books, and the problem is, which one do you read? Which one's good, which one's bad, which one's helpful, which one's too philosophical. And what I discovered as I talked with parents, they really hoped that someone was going to be able to shrink wrap a whole bunch of stuff and say, here, try this. So that's indeed what I've done. What I've done is taken about 25 years of clinical experience and have shrink wrapped it, shrunk it. I've diminished its size and weight, and we'll share with you some of the things that I've discovered in the hope it may be useful to you. So we've got bazillions of books, and yet I noticed as a Lutheran Christian, we also have one other thing. It's a commandment. How good is that? How wise is our God? I've got to believe that our God considers the vocation of parents so precious and so important that he offers the fourth commandment to protect you, okay? And to ensure that all of his baptized children would get the message that carries a promise, the only one of the commandments that carries a promise. The fourth commandment, thou shalt honor thy father and thy mother. It sounds medieval, doesn't it? Yes. And I love it. And indeed, we want our children to understand and embrace God's will and his word and his way for us. And I would encourage those of you who are members of the Lutheran Church, move beyond that little itty-bitty catechism you have at home. Get the large catechism. Supersize your catechism and read about the fourth commandment in the catechism. It's fascinating. Make popcorn and just make a night of it. I have an odd sense of fun. It's what I do. So how hard is this fourth commandment stuff? That's law. And what we love about our faith is the gospel, which embraces us, which says you can never perfectly live up to the law. So let's instead bask and marinate in God's grace, which is fresh and new to us every single day. So let's take it on. We'll start out with the observation that we are just several weeks from Easter. and that right now your children are in one of the most challenging phases called a pre-vacation wait. Is it time yet? No. Right? Counting the days, counting the moments, counting down until, and the teachers who are here understand completely how very difficult it is. It's kind of like right before Christmas. Let's study. Okay. Right? There are eggs to color, and there are church services to attend. So I know this is a particularly challenging time of the year. And yet if we looked at parents, we would recognize that every single one of your days is rich and full of remarkable challenges. Getting your children out of bed, challenge number one, and getting them back in bed at the end of the day. Okay, make up your mind, parents. Do you want them in or do you want them out? So they're up at dawn and you get them in the car and there's a constant rush to get them to school and get them to music lessons, get them to soccer practice, get them to games, get them to Lenten worship Wednesday evenings. And you're back here on a Thursday evening. I want to touch you. You're amazing. That's remarkable dedication. So you pick everyone up, get them back home, microwave something, feed them, do homework with them, say prayers with them, and tuck them in. And then it's time for poor old mom and poor old dad to rest for another day. There's nothing easy about being a parent. And the routine never really quiets. Even when children are on vacation, you have them home longer, and they need more from you and enjoy more time with you. But what I've discovered after a couple of decades as a Christian psychologist is this: the more weary a parent becomes, very often the less we expect of our children. The more depleted a parent becomes, the less we expect of our children. You might notice that if you're on child number 9, for example. One mom who literally had 9 children, and she was visiting with me in my counseling office, and she said, when my first child had a scratch or a boo-boo, oh, heavens, my heart was racing. I didn't know what to do. I was so alarmed. I was so concerned. She said, now the 9th child, unless there's blood, I just can't be bothered. When we're depleted and we're weary, we tend to accept whatever's happening as long as it's not life-threatening. We sort of have that heavy side. It is what it is. We dare never do that with our children, and which means being attentive 24/7 makes being a parent a really challenging thing. As I've talked with parents through the years, I've discovered that for some of them, they've come to imagine that if they've enrolled their children in a good school, that's all they need to do. Drop them off in pre-K and pick them up in 8th grade. And during that time, somewhere between 4K and 8th grade, the objective is that they will have burned onto their hard disk forever everything that they'll ever need to know. Math, science, religion, and they're ready to be picked up and dropped off at high school for 4 years of finishing school. Some parents have the inclination that teaching children about what is good, what is right, what is holy, what's appropriate, is something that only the schools do. And I remain a really vigorous advocate for saying parents share that responsibility with the schools and with their pastor. And in fact, parents have the primary responsibility for ensuring that their children really are living up to all the expectations that are reasonable for them. I'm going to guess, and it's just a guess, that none of you have heard this from any of your children in the last little while. Hello, loving mother dear. I'm wondering, could I fold some towels or do some dishes or unload the dishwasher for you? In fact, I'd like to know if there's anything I could do to improve the quality of our family life together. No, it doesn't happen to you either, huh? It just doesn't seem to work like that. This may sound a little bit more familiar to you. Billy? Yeah? Billy, I'd like you to pick up your coat and I'd like you to hang it up, please, okay? Yeah! Thanks. 15 minutes later. Billy? Yeah? Your coat? Yeah!
yeah, I will.
30 minutes later. Billy, I asked you to pick up your coat. Would you please hang that up for me now?
Why are you always yelling at me? The show is almost over. What do you mean, why am I yelling at you? You want to hear what yelling is?
And there's a good chance that before the conversation is over, the voices are going to get a little bit louder. And people are going to be upset, and Mom's upset because Billy's not listening, and Dad's upset because Dad knows that in a heartbeat he could stride into the room, use his testosterone-fueled voice, and say, Billy, Dad, get that coat hung right up. Dads can do that. Moms, we tend to entreat, beseech, hope. So Dad's upset because Mom can't get Billy to do what it is he needs to do, and now they're shouting, and Billy's little sister's upset because Billy gets all of Mom's and Dad's attention. It works just beautifully. Or sometimes we need to be aware that our children pick up their communication patterns from guess who? Us, heaven forbid. Think about the way that you and your spouse connect with one another when you're chatting. So let's presume that you're calling your husband, Herbert! What? We've established that there's a way that we interact with one another, as opposed to, Herbert? Yes, my darling, what is it? I'm scared to death. Notice how you talk with your children. Notice how you talk with your spouse, because they're noticing as well. And you can positively make your children totally crazy by doing this. First, they want to know if you've eaten something that's come from Colorado. You're way too happy. And it puzzles them because it seems to be a grand departure from your usual interaction style. So just at the outset, and we'll move into developing this theme a little later, your new and improved look is... And it's very hard to yell at somebody who does this. Do you know, in all my years of counseling, I've seen some really challenging kids, and I've never had a child yell at me. I've come to believe they think I have an illness, but that's okay. The truth of the matter is, as I've talked to more and more parents, I've discovered something that's absolutely shocked me. Some parents, at least in my remarkably humble opinion, have come to the impression that they just have to give up. No, he just doesn't mind. She just doesn't listen. The ship has sailed. Go get it, is my answer. Right? You don't simply stand in the dock and go. Parents need to expect obedience. Right? And I find that very important because children learn what it means to submit to someone who loves them. They learn to submit to the love of Mom and Dad. And in doing so, children learn a great deal about their loving Heavenly Father by living with loving earthly parents. And children learn there are rules and there are gifts, and they learn that when they break rules and they're repentant, there's this wonderful forgiveness, genuine, free, full, given from parent to child and given from God to us every single day. I used to love when they'd have Nanny 911. Remember that? Or Super Nanny. They still have that on TV. I haven't watched much TV lately. And Super Nanny was fantastic. I would sit and howl, and my husband would say, "You are just having way too much fun with this." So let's equip you to kind of be parent 911 with some skills. First, you have to ask yourself the question, are my children as respectful as I would like for them to be? Are my children as respectful as I was when I was growing up? An awful lot of parents ask me, how do I know when my child has crossed a line? How do I know when I need to do something? How do I know when a behavior invites correction? there's a litmus test that I found very, very helpful. It will make you 100% confident 100% of the time as to what behavior invites your undivided attention. Simply take a look at what your child has said or what your child has done, and imagine that your child has said or done that in front of Pastor Fleming, classroom teacher, and if your judgment is, I wouldn't let him say that to Pastor, you can't let him say it to his sister. You can't let him say it about the neighbor next door. You can't let him say it to weird Uncle Harold. So there's this kind of a litmus test that says, that's not good, that's not right. I need to react to that in a way that's going to be helpful. Not okay behavior is never okay. It's that simple. So when your child crosses the line, what do? We'll get to that, I've wondered from time to time if Lutheran schools shouldn't have just a few schools in each state called Jesus Academy for particularly gnarly little lambs. And no one seems to be willing to take me up on that, especially teachers. Do you know what I heard a teacher? I was at a teachers conference at Wisconsin North and South Wisconsin District. And I was sitting next to this, wonderful, wonderful, just a very gifted principal. And she said, do you know what I heard one of my teachers say? Tell me more. And she said, the only thing that would make me perfectly happy in my classroom is if my children were orphans. I said, what does that mean? And she says, sometimes parents love their children so much they make us all crazy. Keep loving your kids, no matter what the teacher says, okay? But when your child does cross that line, I'm going to encourage you to really move beyond a feeling of helplessness, moving beyond yelling or threatening or negotiating. Instead, offering some ideas about helpful responses. Parents and teachers talk about discipline all the time, and parents are usually astonished when it isn't going well, and they're frustrated and often feel as if I must be failing, or I must be a lazy parent, or I must not be effective. And I would encourage you to translate that as, I must be a normal parent, right? A very normalizing response. Parents seem astonished that simply by asking their kids to do certain things or to behave in certain ways, that children can become upset about that. Or ignore them. That generally is the way it works. It's been my observation. And often, when you have kids and parents who are struggling one day at a time, sometimes the marriage relationship begins to struggle too. And mom and dad are placing all their emotional energy into putting out domestic forest fires with the little people, and have little emotional energy left to really cultivate, bless you, and to continue with everything the marriage relationship needs so that there's balance there as well. Some parents who have kind of given up are placaters. And by that I would mean they're very passive. They've kind of become spectators in the lives of their children and say, we've tried everything there is to try. Nothing's working very well. As I begin to work with families, I explain, I'm going to love your child from head to toe. And I'm just going to totally have this child marinate in my respect, and my goodwill, and my love. And then we'll talk. And we'll talk about some truth, and we'll give children an opportunity to tell me a little bit about what they do and why they do it. But at the heart of it, I want for children and parents to recognize that behavior is a choice. Behavior really is a choice. And choices that have good, loving consequences happen again and again and again and again. Behaviors that don't have good and loving consequences tend to diminish. We can't neglect the behavior we disapprove of. Can't do that. We can't allow children to rationalize away bad choices for their behavior. And that's probably at the heart of our discussion. This would be the concept on the quiz. We can't neglect behavior that we disapprove of. So we begin any desire to address that very prayerfully, asking that God would provide us with wisdom and insight and courage and patience, and then we take it on. Is there a correct discipline strategy? I don't know if there's correct. Generally, it's useful or not useful. You may be, from time to time, finding yourself, bless you, the disease is moving this way. And these days, I'm noticing kids don't respect other kids. Kids don't always respect their parents. And sometimes kids don't respect their teachers. Our Lutheran day schools remain one of the bastions of education where a godly attitude towards one in authority over us tends to be clear, tends to be helpful for the child. But in many places, that just doesn't happen anymore. An awful lot of kids aren't responsive to traditional expectations of respect because they've been raised really to know that they have rights. And they do. They have wonderful rights. They've come to understand that they're special. They've come to understand no one is better than you. And they've also come to understand the fact that they may not need to give undivided respect to any adult. In the good old days, I guess when most of us were growing up, parents, in a case of any dispute in a school, for example, would always side with whom? Okay, just about 100% of the time. And kids would leave school that day knowing exactly what would happen as soon as mom or dad would find out. I was surprised, in terms of my clinical practice, the number of times that kids would tell me that mom and dad parachuted in and became the child's advocate and undermined the teacher, or was critical of the teacher's best judgments, or was critical of the principal. I had one young man, he was about 11, and he said, well, I told my teacher right away she could just call my parents. And I told her what they were going to say. They were going to say, look, you're just our employee. My parents pay your salary and can sue your bleep off. An 11-year-old, public school kid. But my eyebrows were raised. And I thought, I'm their employee too. Oh, this can't bode well. So some children have discovered if they confront their parents' authority and resist their parents' authority, there's a good effort, good likelihood that their effort will result in getting away with it and succeeding, simply because mom and dad are often too tired to do much else. Truth of the matter is, respect is not the mantra of new education. It's children who need to discover who they are, children who need to be all that they can be. And I believe both of those things, by the way, but not in lieu of understanding submission to parents and respect for parents. And it's not particularly fashionable to say those things these days because it's a politically correct age. And we don't want to offend anyone, and we don't want to be critical of anyone, and we don't want to risk emotionally scarring anyone. And so the politically correct world tells us there's a wide range of acceptable behavior for children. So parents have decided it's an age of caution. And there's a fear of disapproval. And instead what we've done is we've said, what matters is tolerance. We simply need to be tolerant of children's behavior. All of children's behavior. And we're told tolerance is a virtue, which is not necessarily my recollection of what our Lord taught us. Thou shalt be tolerant. It isn't in there. I checked all 10. But we get that impression sometimes. When we don't establish structure, rules, clear sense of parent authority, child submission, we have problems that just simply don't go away. Children get the impression that everything is negotiable. I've met some brilliant little attorneys under age 12 who have just a sparkling career awaiting them, who can argue a point brilliantly in the face of an adult with no no sense of weariness or defensiveness whatsoever. And so we need to ask, what's getting in the way of our effectiveness as parents in this particular area? And we could talk about parenting for each of those 5 to 7 hours Pastor mentioned, but we won't go there. I don't want to frighten you. All right? We just look at respect. Sometimes, as parents, we multitask. It's called living a normal life. So it's not unusual for mom, perhaps, or dad to be making a salad or cutting up the vegetables for dinner and checking email at the same time and cluing in the news and talking to our children at the same time. We multitask so often that our child could infer parenting isn't a number one priority, that we have to kind of compete with carrots for their attention. And yet, when we talk with our children, we want their undivided attention. And yet we rarely give them the same kind of courtesy. So in part, I'm going to encourage you to model the courtesy to your child that you would expect from your child. And sometimes that means, I'm really busy with dinner right now. I am so eager to talk with you. How about if right after dinner you and I sit down? Would that be okay? Cool. All right. So we respect them by not multitasking. Sometimes as parents we have trouble being consistent. One mom told me, I did that parenting stuff, for a couple of weeks. And it's not working for me, so I'm not really doing it anymore. One lady said, if I can't stay on my diet for a week, I certainly can't do this for a week. So some consistency pops up as being problematic from time to time. And quite honestly, it's easier not to discipline. At first, you can kind of coast for a while. And we begin to believe the myth, nothing we do will really make a difference. But there are some things we do that will make a remarkable difference. Some parents will say, my kid isn't in the same league. Doesn't use those nasty words. Great, what does he do? That's not so good, is it? No, but he's not swearing. Fantastic. Celebrate the good. Focus on what it is you need to do in terms of teaching and loving out loud and caring. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit because I always get behind. It's what I do. It's who I am. Let me have you flip probably to 15. 14, 15, I think we're pretty close. Examine the nature of the rules that guide your family's life together. What are the rules? When I ask children, do you have any rules in your family? I hear fascinating things. Yes, don't put the gerbil in the microwave. Sometimes when I talk with parents, I'll make broad assumptions and say, our children are wonderful gifts of God. They're great kids. It's not as if they're burning down the garage or something. And I talked with the congregation on one occasion, and the place went deadly silent. A lady raised her hand. It was the pastor's wife. Oh, no. And she said, our son burned down the garage last week. Okay, so you can't make a rule against everything. You cannot possibly imagine everything that you need to make a rule against. But think about it. Have you ever noticed that when you make a decision your child doesn't like, he or she has a 4 or 6 syllable utterance? Mom, can I go to Billy's house before dinner? No, sorry, it's really close to dinner. Let me have you just wash your hands. Could you help me set the table? But Mom... 5 syllables. And the child hasn't said anything disrespectful. The child is expressing an opinion. And then you hear the refrain, which is, why not? Very good vocalizing, good choir members in the making. Now, parents make the mistake of presuming that's a real question and begin to offer an explanation for their decision. But we sometimes expect that our child is going to say, thanks, Mom, for that incredibly helpful rationale. so lucky you're my mom. That doesn't happen that much. Instead, the child's more likely to say, I can't believe you're so mean. And so when I talk with parents, I begin to ask them, are there things at home that you could take out of the picture of your child's lives in terms of their behavior that would allow for the entire family to function more happily and in greater harmony? In other words, are there behaviors at home that are making you bug nutty, right? Just making you crazy? Name 5. Give me one.
Earbuds.
Earbugs?
Yeah.
Oh, bugs, that's serious. Okay, so kids are just plugged in, right? Give me another. Oh yeah, teasing, a lot of that. Anybody have children who shout in the wrong places? Yes, okay. What else would you identify as a behavior that you kind of wish weren't there? Thank you. Anything else? Comes to mind? Oh yeah, I know none of your children do that, but it's nice of you to tell about the other children who have that problem. Exactly right. Sometimes just lying or fighting or stalling. I would encourage you and your spouse to sit together and to come up with the 5 things that are happening at home that are making the home environment stressful for the entire community of the family. Is it yelling? Is it whining? Is it fighting? Is it growing earbugs? And I would encourage you to write them down. And then you get this wonderful sheet of paper that may look like no fighting, no whining, no talking back. Do it now, please. Whatever it is that's on your list. This comes from a wonderful strategy from a gentleman named John Rosemond, R-O-S-E-M-O-N-D. And it's a takeaway system. And my recommendation is you identify those 5 things for your children, and then you have a meeting. Make popcorn, my number 1 food of choice, apparently. We're going to have a family conversation. Uh-oh, they went to a meeting. The older ones know. And you simply begin and you say, you know, we're going to try to see if we can make things at home a little less difficult, a little more pleasant for everybody. Everyone understands one another's expectations. And so you talk with the children together about each of the rules. So you might look at one that says no whining. And you give the example of Billy who needs to go to his friend's house before dinner. And you tell your children, so if I would hear from you, but I really want to go, I would say to you, that sounds like whining to me. And I'd give you a chance to turn it around. I kind of give you a reminder. And if you said, I don't care, then, well, we'd probably have a consequence. And at this point in the meeting, every child's ears will be, consequence, what? What's the consequence? We'll get to those. And you move through the next. No fighting. Here's what I mean by fighting. Here's what I mean by lying. Here's what I mean by earbugs. All right? And depending on the age of the child, you talk through an example. And you write out the rule, you post the rule, and you ask the kids, anybody have any questions? What happens if we break a rule? And they will break rules, and we know that. And naturally, you will presume that's the question they're going to really want answered. And so you've also prepared in that chat you and your spouse had a list of takeaways. And a list of takeaways ordered in terms of timeliness. Things that children do, privileges, every single day. Give me an example.
Video games.
No. Absolutely right. That's a home run. Give me another. TV, excellent. Give me another. Reading. No, I mean,
professor, and I've not seen that even with any of my students. Reading in your under. Oh, reading in your Okay. We identify those 5 things when the child is older and might have words like cell phone, car key, computer time, hair dryer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a pastor, all right? Exactly, all right?
And you will get looks from your children like this. And they're going to say, that's not fair, 4 syllables at least. And you would say, that sounds like
whining.
Remember this face? The one you've been practicing? This is where you put it on and you keep it on. Right? Because what you're going to do is you're going to create a chart. And it might be each child, depending on age, may need his or her own chart. Often, if children are similarly aged, it can look like TV, computer. It might be a treat before bedtime. You know, so you list 4 or 5 things. And so the child comes in and says, I want to go over to Billy's house. We're going to have dinner. I'm going to go. That sounds like whining to me. Well, I don't care. And here's the fun part. Oh, that's too bad. You extract from your pocket a large marker. And you look at the list. Wow, no TV. Bummer. That's so mean. There goes computer time. But Mom, that's not fair. Oh, wow. No dessert before bedtime. And then at some point you get this. And you haven't changed. Now, kids get it. One mom said to me, I'm going to be through that list in about 2 minutes. And so you may need a longer list at first, and you may need to use bedtimes. 8 o'clock, 7:45, 7:30, 7:15, 7 o'clock, 6:45. One mom said, I'm going to have to call the teacher at school and say, I'm sorry, Billy's got to be in his room. It's noon today. I'll bring them over. But kids get it. How well do they get it? Remember, we're kind of teaching, if you're gonna, do the crime, you gotta what?
Do the time.
That's right. One mom had a set of twins, and they were 12 years old, and they just didn't see the same about anything. And they'd really gotten into it, and Mom says, I just stay out of it until they ask me to intercede, or it happens in my presence, a fight. So she said she'd see one pull the other out of view and smack them, right? Out of her eyesight. It's not her purview in that moment. And she said she knew that one of the boys had just really been mean. And the other twin came in. Looked at the list. Got the marker. And pounded his brother into the floor. Now we said a decision is that behavior is a decision. That's the best illustration I can give you of that. Behavior is a choice and a decision. And he put the cap back on before he went to pummel his brother, and off he went. So you create that list of takeaways, and the beauty of it is, in the panic of a disciplinary moment, you don't do something really stupid. I want you in your room every single day until school is out. What? Stupid. Or you're says, okay, I want you to do a timeout for 2 minutes, and you've told the child about the same behavior, I want you to go in your room for the rest of the week after school. So suddenly we've got Mommy and Daddy Parody, which is a good thing. Both Mom and Dad know how to wield the marker very effectively. I've had moms who have little spiral notebooks, and they have their little markers in their pocket. When they go in the van, one mom has 3 spiral notebooks as a necklace. She gets through stores now with no problem at all. They seem to understand there are consequences for behavior. So you make the list, the children get it, and here's the remarkable news that you may or may not expect. Within a period of 2 weeks, 80% of the 5 behaviors that are making you crazy will have diminished substantially, if not disappeared completely. I was voting a couple of years ago, and after being in practice for 25 years, you lose track of people who've been clients. And one young man came up and he said, you know that takeaway crap? I said, hi, who are you? And he said, I grew up with it, and I'm using it for my kids, and it's great. Now you notice me pointing to this. You can't be frazzled. You have to be unflappable. Think of the traffic cop. You've been going 36 miles an hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. Now I know none of you speed. What happens is a red light comes on in the back. That was a terrible sound, and you pull over to the side of the road. You say unkind things to yourself. Stupid, stupid, stupid. And the policeman comes to your window, and he taps. He says, good morning. Good morning. May I see your license and registration, please? Sure. And then he goes away for a long time. Maybe he's out for a donut, I don't know. And he comes back, and he's got a little pink sheet of paper in his hand, and he says, this is for you. It's your license and registration, and you need to respond to that in 10 days. You be safe and have a good day now. And you end up by saying, thank you. How much sense does that make to take that into parenting with us? The cop does not come up and say, how many times do I have to tell you not to speed in the subdivision? You should know better by now. Children out here. Have a good day. Or the same referee at a football game. You know, the rules there are pretty clear too. The referee doesn't come out and say, okay, which one of you hit the other first? 15 yards, personal foul. Doesn't say, I don't want you to do that again. Okay, it just levels the penalty. And always with this, which is completely disarming, because it seems almost irrational to yell at somebody who is calm, quiet, peaceful, and composed, with a crayon finish, right? Or a marker finish. Now, does this work? Yes, about 80%. One child, when Green Bay used to go to Super Bowls, long time. One little guy had his birthday on on Super Bowl Sunday, and he had gotten invited to a sleepover. I said, that is fantastic. Not going. Why aren't you going? Because his family had also created rules for parents. In his family believed that all of the members of the family should live as a community, and everyone should make choices, which makes the community, the family, better. So the children were able to make one rule for their parents, if the parents approved of it. So a rule like no breathing, that's not a good rule. Number one rule that gets made for children, by children, for parents is no. That's it.
What?
That's a number one rule, no yelling. So here's this little guy, Super Bowl Sunday, straight ahead. He's not going to this great sleepover party. Why? He said, it's the Packer game. On TV, every time my dad yells, $1 goes into the fun box. On I'm gonna be rich. Very entrepreneurial young man, it seemed to me. Now there's some exceptions. One of the exceptions might be fighting. If you can't decide who started it, they both get a takeaway. And you go, sorry, I can't decide who started it. You both get a takeaway. But that's not fair. Oh, that sounds like whining. Oh, sorry. You're right, you're fine. Now, some people will say, you know, I don't know if I have the time or energy to do all that. Set one goal. A single mom that I knew had 3 daughters, and the daughters were age 12, 10, and 6. And Mom got home just a little bit after they did. She said, every night I'd walk in, and she says, there are all the book bags, there are all the shoes, there are all the coats, all the mittens, all the hats. She says, and the first thing I want to do when I walk in the kitchen and see them is what? Great way to start the night with the kids. And I said, make a rule. And she looked at me as if I'd lost my mind. Yeah. I said, really, make a rule. So what rule do I make? Please hang up your coats or they're mine. What does that mean? They don't get them the next day. What do you mean? Well, you just put them in your car trunk. That's it? Yeah, that's it. Went home, had a meeting with girls. Girls understood their coats were going to be appropriated. Mom came home the next night at 6 p.m. There were the coats, there were the shoes, there were the book bags, there were the hats, there were the scarves. No change. I'm seeing a client in my office and my pager went off. I think, oh, someone's on a ledge. It was Mom. And she said, the coats are still there. She paged me to tell me the coats were still there. I said, pick them up. Put them in your trunk. Then what? Come home again tomorrow. Have a good night. Bye. Well, as she explained it to me later the next morning, the girls came downstairs, scurried about. Where'd you put my coat? Mom, you know where it goes. And they found, you know, their play jackets or things they'd kind of outgrown. Very next night, 6 p.m., I'm paged again. This time I know what to expect. Everything's in the doorway again. Pick it up, pick it up. By the 4th morning, Mom got a call at work from the principal at school. And principals rarely call you to commend you on your parenting. That's just been my observation. Is Bethany okay? Yes, this is a 6-year-old. Bethany's fine. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Well, her teacher was just a little bit concerned at recess today. It appears as though she's wearing a quilt outside. And we just thought we'd check with you about that. And Mom said, well, you told me to work with Dr. Yahnke. Okay, I got it. And within 2 more days, what did the floor look like when she walked in? Spotless! Because she made a public service announcement that following the code, she was going to start taking possession of book bags, hats, gloves, scarves. You know, you might call it negligence and want to call it social services. I call it a learning experience. And things were fine from that point forward, and she began to establish other things. But we also want to reward our children for making good choices, not just punish the bad choices. Ask your children to set goals. How many takeaways do you think you'll have today? None. Oh, I don't know. That's awfully lot. That's a lot. Well, maybe only 3. Okay, that'll be good. It's better than 72 yesterday. 3 would be good. And we want children to have a sense of being prayerful about what they're doing, talking with Mom and Dad, and receiving encouragement about what they're doing. And when they meet their goals, we want to recognize them and affirm them and encourage them for that. And I don't mean you buy them a car. The number one most precious thing that a parent gives to a child is, thank you, time. Undivided face time with Mom and or Dad. The most precious commodity that there is in the day-to-day life of a child, that they can just put their hands on you. Very, very important to them. And after about 1 or 2 weeks, you may discover these things aren't happening anymore, and you adopt some new ones. Right? So it's a system that works very, very well, and children begin to get it. As I talked with children whose parents had begun the respect system, one child said, you know, we've been doing this since Christmas. Yeah, what do you think? My mom hasn't yelled at me since Christmas. That's weird. She just smiles all the time. Is that better or worse? It's good. Okay? It does change the tenor, the tone of a family. But it does have to be wrapped in prayer, and it can't be seen as a punishment, and there are incentives and there are rewards. And ultimately, children understand I can make good choices and good things happen. And whenever good things happen, no matter how big or how small, that always means the day closes with a spirit of thanksgiving to our God. So there's always something to be thankful for and something to grow into by His grace. I hope you'll give it a try. I think you'll find it's useful. Your children will be curious. Start it on a Friday night so you have all weekend. And if you're going to adopt one rule for mom and dad, be sure to break the rule all weekend. So,
Why do you do that? Mom, that sounds like yelling to me.
because it gives you a chance to model how to say you're sorry and ask for forgiveness. You're right, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to do that a little bit less. I owe you $1, don't I? Yeah. All right. I forgive you, Mom. All right, now that's not how it works in church, but there's no doubt in my mind that God's good gifts to us in the form and shape of our children will continue to challenge you. But be confident of this. We have our Lord's promise. He will equip you thoroughly for the doing of His will, that which is pleasing to Him. And if you are struggling with parenting, don't be alone with that. Don't imagine you're the only parent in the world who struggles. Reach out, talk to other parents. Talk with your child's teacher or principal or pastor, and be confident that it can get better and better. And children enjoy when things aren't as stressful as well. So I wish you God's richest blessings as you continue to take care of the little ones whom He has given you. Thanks for letting me spend some time with you.